Parishes podcast. I'm Donald McCorkindale, Church of Scotland minister in the parishes of Strontian, Ardgour and Morvern, linked with Acharacal and Ardnamurchan, bringing you news from these parishes and beyond. Last week was a particularly busy week, lots of things going on. But within last week, on Thursday, there was a highlight. There was a gathering of nearly 300 Church of Scotland ministers. I'm not sure that in 30-some years of ministry I have ever been in the presence of so many ministers at the same time. And it really was a very encouraging, uplifting occasion. Sometimes it has been said that ministers are like manure, that they do a huge amount of good when spread very thinly across the land, but can be rather nauseous in a heap. Well, that certainly was not the case last Thursday. It was a really encouraging time, a good opportunity to network, to meet old friends and to make some new ones, and to hear the good news stories of what God is up to. God ain't finished with the Church of Scotland yet, and there's no sign of that happening any time soon. Although, of course, we need to put all that within the context of the reality that numbers are declining, finance is declining, and there are opportunities that we need to open ourselves to the possibility of doing new things. Ours is a God who makes all things new. I'm encouraged, and I decided recently, before I got to the conference, but while driving down to Edinburgh, I was thinking, there's no point in going along with all the gloom and doom and despair stories. We need to be positive. I had been listening to a podcast and heard about a fascinating psychology experiment. Two groups of people, one identifying as pessimists and the other as optimists, were taken on a walk on an identical pathway. And along the way, there were banknotes hidden in some of the vegetation by the side of the path. And the experiment concluded that the optimists noticed and found nearly all those good things along the way, while the group of pessimists went for a walk and didn't notice. Do we take time to notice the things around us? Are we open to seeing what God is up to? Last week, I had been preaching on the story of the time when the disciples were on the Galilee, the storm got up, and Jesus came to them walking on the water. A miracle, a miraculous sign that caused the disciples to say, truly, he is the Son of God. And, well, do you ever wonder, why doesn't God just show himself in some miraculous way like that, and then it would be clear, and I and everyone else would surely have to believe? Well, it doesn't really work that way, and most of life is lived when the sun doesn't stop, nor miraculous feedings or people walking on water or turning water into wine. And yet in the midst of the ordinariness of life, there can be those glimpses of heaven. I'm recording this on Sunday the 2nd of March, Transfiguration Sunday, the last Sunday before we enter into the season of Lent. And the Transfiguration brings us one of those moments when when heaven opens up, heaven touches earth, and there's one of those defining moments when the disciples knew who Jesus was. On that mountaintop, the story, the account told in Matthew, Mark, and Luke tells of how Jesus took Peter and James and John up a high mountain, and that Moses and Elijah appeared with Jesus. Moses representing the law, representing the past. Elijah representing the prophets, the future. Although Elijah, obviously a character from the past, but symbolising that sense of vision and possibility for the future. We live a lot of life in the past, don't we? Regurgitating the stories, going over the way things happened, reminiscing, looking back to the glory days. We spend a lot of time in the future, worrying about things that have not yet happened, planning, preparing, and perhaps not savouring the moment, the now. Well, on that Transfiguration mountain top, Elijah and Moses would disappear from the disciples' sight. Jesus, shining brightly, was the disciples' focus, as it should be ours, the disciples of today, turning our eyes to Jesus. Peter and the disciples wanted to savour that moment, to bottle it up, to hold on to it. Let's build shelters, let's build tents and hold on to this moment. But it was just to be a moment that would change them forever, and a moment from which Jesus would lead them back down the mountainside. As we read on in Matthew chapter 17, we then hear the story of a healing of a young boy. They were taken down to the places of need. As disciples today are given those glimpses of heaven and reminded of the need to get back down from the mountaintop experiences and on with the business of being the church on the ground, being the church bringing God's love, healing, mercy, inclusion, and all his good gifts for all. Some of the things that are happening next week around the church include conversations that matter on Monday the 3rd of March, 2:30 at Ardgour Church. Will be an opportunity to gather, if you wish, if you are able, to take some time in that safe space to talk about dying and grief and bereavement. I'll be joined by Dr. Isla MacLeod, a local psychologist with a particular interest in grief and bereavement. And, well, we'll be talking about those issues, but very much focusing on the questions that folk are asking. And I look forward to that conversation. There'll be a similar opportunity in Strontian at the end of the month, the 31st of March, 7:30 at Strontian Church, for a conversation that matters. A difficult conversation, but one that's so important. And in many ways, we talk about death in order that we can live well. Jesus said, "I have come that they might have life in all its fullness. Life now and life for all eternity." So that's Monday the 3rd and Monday the 31st of March. Tomorrow, 3rd at Ardgour, and on the 31st at Strontian in the evening. Wednesday evening prayers continue, 10 o'clock every Wednesday, and it's always good to welcome, well, there's often 15, 20 folk, 10 o'clock on a Wednesday evening, with many more watching, listening, yes, watching, watching the recording at later times. On Thursday the 6th of March, we have another of our Trees League gatherings, 7:30, again for conversations that matter. And there we will be thinking about Lent. Lent, of course, having begun, will begin. If you're listening to this before the 5th of March, it will begin on Wednesday the 5th. If you're listening to this after then Lent began on Ash Wednesday, the 5th of March. So on the Thursday the 6th, the gathering at Trees League Village Hall, we will be thinking about things to give up and things to pick up for Lent. It's a busy week, and then on the Friday, the first Friday in March is always designated the World Day of Prayer. And this year it has been put together by Christian women from the Cook Islands, and it is themed around part of Psalm 139, a beautiful psalm, and the theme is I made you wonderful. I made you wonderful. And on Monday the 10th of March, the Guild will be meeting at Lochalan at Keel Church, and there will be some Bible study, some conversation, some thinking around the Guild theme, Let Us Build a House. And I should also have mentioned that on Sunday the 9th, along with the usual Sunday morning services for the second Sunday of the month, second Sunday there will be the worship at Kingairloch Church, 2 o'clock in the afternoon at Kingairloch. I was saying there, we tend to live a lot of life in the past. We live a lot of life thinking about the future. And I think we are called to be more focused about living life in the now. We hear a lot about mindfulness, and the secular world too is embracing the need to focus on the now. So as we draw this podcast towards its close, let me invite you into that story of the mountaintop experience, and to take a moment to enjoy and to know and to savour this moment, this now. Jesus takes Peter and James and John up a high mountain, away from the crowds, beyond the familiar paths, into the presence of something holy. There before their eyes, he is transfigured, his face shining like the sun, his clothes dazzling white. Moses and Elijah appear, and for a moment, past and present meet, present and future meet. The law and the prophets bear witness to the one who fulfills them. Peter, overwhelmed, wants to capture the moment, to hold on to the glory. Before he can act, a cloud descends, and a voice speaks. This is my beloved Son. listen to him. And then it's just Jesus. No heavenly figures. Just Jesus reaching out, touching them, saying, "Do not be afraid." And Jesus leads them down the mountain. The mountain fades behind them, and the road to Jerusalem stretches ahead. The glory remains, but it's hidden now, carried in their hearts, shaping their journey. Listen to him. What is Jesus saying to you today? Thank you for listening to the Link Parishes podcast. For more news of what's on and worship times, check out peninsulachurches.org.uk. You can find us on Facebook, and if you haven't already done so, you can subscribe to this podcast at Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube. The Link Parishes are Church of Scotland congregations and charities registered with Oscar.